Sunrise Hike with Blue Mycospawn, February 18th, 2010. I didn't have to wait long to get back in touch with Psilocytes. As was customary for high school calendar years, the last week of February was our winter school vacation. So our crew made a plan. Teton was to acquire some mycospawn from a friend in his old town, and we were to consume them for a climb up Mount Argonne, the local town mountain. Well, I guess it's more accurate to call it a huge, forested hill. The mountain occupies space in 4 different towns, but it isn't terribly high and consists of a wide network of trails, perfect for mountain biking and running. We planned to hike the Blackberry Bluff, a trail that went straight up to the summit, and we planned to time it so that we could catch the sunrise at the top. We got together at the house of a new friend, someone who wasn't going to consume mycospawn with us, but was down to drive us to the mountain and watch after us as we journeyed into the great unknown. His name was Torty. He was 2 years older than us, but seemed to get along with us better than his fellow classmates. The power users his age, our frequent green power suppliers, were a bunch of strong personalities that would easily drown out any word Torty might want to get out there. So it made sense that he preferred the younger audience of our group. Like the rest of the crew, except me, he was a huge fan of all boarding sports. I was happy for him to literally and figuratively take the wheel for this journey, because there didn't seem to be anything suspicious about him, and his energy was mild-mannered. We all gathered at his house one night around the end of vacation to have a sleepover so we could get up early and head to the mountain. He had an awesome basement equipped with foosball, ping pong, and a good-sized television. We ended up watching the trippy film Fear and Choking while trying to fall asleep. A cool idea, however cliché. It was the dawn of another journey into the great unknown. Of course, we were going to watch Fear and Choking. The first mistake we made was starting the movie at midnight and not falling asleep until 2 a.m, with a plan of waking up 2 hours later to consume the blue mycospawn supplied by Teton. We were set to be running on 2 hours of sleep after a night of heavy green power usage, which was not really the best energy preservation for an epic excursion into the great unknown, but an unsurprising choice for 16-year-old dudes. Before bed we inspected and divided the mycospawn that Teton purchased for us, and it all looked incredibly strange. While most mycospawn are brown-capped, white-stemmed, and only turn slightly blue in spots where they get bruised, these mycospawn were called blue caps and were almost completely blue, with any whiteness changed to a milky sky blue. Not only that, but one of the specimens was a mega button, as we called it. Instead of having a circular cap with a stem that branched down, this mega button appeared to be a massive cap and stem squished and fused together, about the size of a walnut. None of us had ever seen anything like it, so Tree Demon and I decided that we would split it in half so that no one had to eat the whole thing. The thing snapped in half like a piece of chalk, the inside pure sky blue with the texture of a hard piece of cheese. Tree Demon and I looked at each other wide-eyed and nervously smiled as we claimed our halves of the mega button to supplement our normal-sized stems. We stood up to the challenge and thought we'd probably be better for it effect-wise. We woke up to an alarm and decided that we should all have some granola bars before consuming the mycospawn, so that our bodies had a little bit of something else to keep us going, not just the odd-looking incarnation of Psilocytes. So the 4 of us, Teton, Leaf, Tree Demon and I, consumed our mycospawn portions, while Rufflesack and Torty stayed green power only for the ride. Rufflesack was intimidated by the appearance of the mycospawn, rightfully so, and had very little experience with Psilocytes, so he decided to be an additional sort of sitter on the trip. I winced as I choked down the chewy stem and the compressed cotton candy texture of the mega button, though the flavour was mild, like that of mycospawn from the market. The 7 of us piled into Torty's car and headed off to the mountain in the dark of the morning. I was simply excited to see how it would go, and didn't have nearly as much trepidation as I should have had. To consume some ostensibly potent mycospawn first thing in the morning, before a sunrise hike, was plenty to have concerns about. As we drove on, it couldn't have been more than 10 minutes into the drive when I already felt psilocytes awakened in my body. The body load was a kind of a contradiction. I felt lighter, gradually divorced from the normal sensations of my body, but also heavier and compressed, as if I was just barely evaporating in some struggle between solid and gas. 5 minutes later, I felt light-headed, like on the precipice of a dehydration episode, trapped and possibly deprived of oxygen. As I looked ahead at the road through the windshield, it didn't seem like we were moving anymore, and what I saw instead was a hill in the road that we were coming up on eternally. Driving toward the hill only made it move further away from us, as if we'd never actually go over. Imagine having a toy car on a rug with a hump in the rug, and as you move the car into the rug hill, it gets pushed further and further until it dissipates at the edge. The only difference here was that there was no apparent edge of the road for the hill to disappear off, and our car was supposed to be physically incapable of pushing a concrete hill like a rug hump. This impossibility made me think we had crashed and died, and our awareness was then stuck in a loop like a frozen video game. All of this happened with the song Sweet Honey by Slightly Stupid playing in the car, a song I had never heard before that came across morbidly and even sort of sadistic. I breathed rapidly and urged Leaf to open the window. He didn't hear me the first time, nor the second time, so I all but yelled, "Leaf, open the fucking window." "Dude, chill," he said, bothered. He opened the window just a crack, to which I stuck my mouth up to and gasped for air, as if previously underwater. After getting my breath back, I remarked that I wasn't feeling so great, but seemed to be feeling better. The crew assured me that we were all okay and about to reach the mountain. As we got out of the car and I drank some water, my sense of well-being swiftly returned, and I was ready for the hike. I had experienced what we call a rough come-up. Knowing that we had Rufflesack and Torty in trustworthy states of mind was comforting, and I was itching to get on up the mountain. It took us a minute to start hiking, however, because Treedemorn was stuck in the car, facing mind-body issues just like I had. He was hunched over in some stomach pang, but the episode passed for him as it had for me, and so the crew took off. The mega button seemed to be the culprit for our difficult come-ups, and we reasoned that our bodies must have thought the mega button was a little too foreign for processing. However it had gone down digestively, we were on the other side now. Psilocytes had begun to course through our bodies. The first visual sensation I remember was a simple flash of red, as if a television screen had turned completely red, and slowly dissipated back to the original programming. My vocal response was involuntary. "It's red time," I cheered. My friends looked at me puzzled. I laughed, explaining I didn't know what it meant, but goddamn, it was red time all right. I didn't know what was going on, but was intrigued by the power of this vision, and fancied this communication with Psilocytes to be unique in its phenomenology relative to my first time ingesting the golden mycospawn. We stopped to rest for a bit, and I looked at Torty's jacket, which was designed with big stripes of purple and green. The separate stripes appeared to be in constant flux, as if each stripe were alternating purple and green at such a high frequency that it only appeared that they were separate colours, while they were really one and the same. Oh my God, I thought, and I pronounced my famous mycospawn-fueled declaration. Purple and green is all you need, This carried much more weight than my previous intuition that it was red time, and with the help of psilocytes, my brain took this idea to greater levels. Why is purple and green all you need? My mind was disposed to a new system of colour theory. Blue was my favourite colour, the colour of lapis lazuli, and purple and green were the secondary colours that consisted of blue and the other two respective primary colours. In this way, purple and green were extensions of blue, and it all made sense. If blue symbolized wisdom and natural divine power, and red was a symbol of passion and fire, then purple symbolized love, a union of passion and wisdom. Similarly, combining blue wisdom with the life-giving, raw creative force of yellow, of the sun, resulted in green, the basis of nature and fundamental building block of organic life. Furthermore, to my delight, purple and green were the colours of green power, which of course was staple in my spiritual growth. So there it was. All you need is purple and green. All you need is love and nature. Of course it sounds like a tired platitude now, or to cite Michael Pollan, a banal hallmark moment, but in the heat of psilocytes I could see it no other way, and the weight of this realization was potent. I realized that I'd been drawn to these colours my whole life, the cool colours, and one of my favourite albums by Animal Collective, Merriweather Post Pavilion, was coloured purple and green, not to mention the song it had called Bluish. I didn't know it at the time, but I was awakening to the reality of Jungian synchronicities, and this door was to be forever open. The rest of the journey up the mountain remained potent, though perhaps not as heady as my purple and green discovery. Leaf and I had a moment where we both rested in the snow and giggled about how we felt like we were becoming the snow and melting with it. Before long we snapped out of the trance, the rest of our friends impatiently waiting for us to get up and keep going. We were definitely missing the sunrise, indicated by the amount of light that was already upon us, but we didn't care much about failing the Sunrise at Mountain Peak mission. Tree Demon and I engaged in a playful linguistic back and forth that resulted in some extended metaphor, one about how it was getting brighter out as we got closer to the peak of the mountain. "It's a slippery slope," I remember saying, initially only to talk about the ground we walked on. "But it's looking bright for us at the peak." Even though these metaphors were a bit obvious, we were hardly able to contain our amusement at how connected everything seemed to be. We couldn't say anything without it having a double meaning, if not a triple, and it felt like we had tapped into a more fundamental network of communication. I withdrew into my head during the last leg of the climb and started to think about my ex-girlfriend, who had broken up with me about a month before. The relationship had lasted 9 months, and though I had really cared about her and the time we had spent, I realized that I could now look back at the relationship and see that it was the first time it needed to be, something that would precede many more relationships to come. I thought about all the negative aspects of the relationship that were left behind, and could easily rationalize that it was all for the better. I was only 16, after all, and she was a couple years older than me. My virginity was lost, and I still had 2.5 more years of high school. In fact, I was already smitten with someone else a year older than me, someone who I chatted with on AOL Instant Messenger and received almost daily hugs from. Her name was Tara, and how much I loved her suddenly overwhelmed me. Almost uncontrollably, I let out an utterance to my friends. "I want to have baby lions with Tara." My friends were equally confused and struck with laughter, similar to when I shouted about red time. "What does that even mean?" some of them asked. They knew I was a fan of cats, but this serious declaration of mine was ridiculous. I knew it though, and I laughed along with them. What an odd way of expressing my desire to hook up with someone. I was slightly paranoid that my friends might think I was losing it, what with the red time, purple and green, and now baby lions. but I could assess my own mental state and fancied myself more a natural joker than a madman. We made it to the top of the mountain to find that we were peaking at the peak, and the extended metaphor had been fully extended. How did we know? Everything that was supposed to be still was in some sort of motion, whether it was waving or dilating. 2 steel towers on the mountain, maybe used for cell phone or radio communications, wielded large beige saucers mounted on their sides, and I realized that I really had no idea what they were for. The saucers appeared to grow and shrink, and I found myself not entirely sure how big anything on the mountain really was relative to how I saw it. We were deep in the great unknown for sure, and with the day's unseasonable warmth, the entire sensation of being on the summit was much like being on a different planet. We explored the area for a bit and ended up on this heightened wooden platform that was used for gazing at neighbouring mountain ranges. I got lost in the views as I saw the valleys of trees wave back and forth like wiggling broccoli when I heard Teton and Leaf laugh hysterically. Leaf had pulled on the string of Teton's sweatshirt until it reached full extension, and he was whipping around the slack in amusement. Though this appeared as silly and childish as it sounds, we were mesmerized as we watched the string move in gravity-defying ways. Leaf held the string out in a manner that should have made it perfectly straight and horizontal, but the string still appeared to possess contradictory valleys and peaks. We laughed even harder as Teton told Leaf to stop tugging it, a joke about masturbation that was common to the group at the time. This was all great fun until Rufflesack stepped in with a light chuckle and separated Leaf and Teton. He told them gently that they needed to stop because what they were doing was stupid. Though he was probably right, being under the influence of only green power and thus more tethered to reality, we were briefly all a little mad at him for dissipating our string fascination. Rufflesack thought this was all hilarious, and as he laughed, I looked at his face and saw a classic anime background appear behind him, a peachy tone with bubbles flying into the air. His face looked like Kermit the Frog, in virtue of the narrowness of his eyes and the length of his grin. This only appeared in a flash, like so many other visions. We decided to hacky sack on this platform and giggled like children every time it went over the edge. It was amazing to watch the hacky sack as we kicked it around, the sack leaving trails every time it soared through the air. Even though this was disorienting, we still managed to play with skill and precision, or at least more than one would expect. We all agreed that the coming down process had more or less begun, so it was only fitting that we started our descent back to the car. Yes, it seemed that the effects were perhaps less now than they were before, but I kept finding myself unsure if that really was the case. I had this idea that the blue mycospawn, the mega button in particular, might have had an effect that was different from other mycospawn I had consumed, and maybe this experience with psilocytes would last longer than expected. Then it hit me how little I actually knew about consuming mycospawn and how it affected the mind and body. So who knew what was really happening to me, or to us? Then I got a strangely assertive feeling in me that I was not going to see my family ever again. Perhaps we had exited consensus reality and done so permanently. If that were the case, I'd have to grow up and learn how to deal with it. I was sad that I would never see my family again, but I knew that I could make their memories live on through my own personality. Of course this was the case, I reasoned, because parts of them were saved in my consciousness forever as a coagulation of every word and gesture I had ever perceived in their performances. Moreover, I would have to take up surfing as a necessity, now forever living with my new family of surfer friends. We would live in shacks by the sea, I reckoned, and probably live off various crustaceans, bivalves, and fish. Whatever happened, I knew I would be able to handle it. As we arrived at the car, my fear of being stuck inside of it returned. It wasn't that I didn't trust Torty as a driver, but I had to face the fact that I truthfully had no idea what he was thinking. He could have been suicidal and secretly hated us all, for all we knew, and could have been ready to drive us all straight into another vehicle. I appeared to be composed as we got going, though I remember cringing each time a car drove by. We were going to the beach, I was told, because we all needed to cool down before being back in the presence of parents. An urge to piss came over me, and for some reason I thought it'd be perfect to pee out the window. Maybe the only way to prevent us from crashing was for me to urinate out the window, I figured, through some twisted secret logic of the great unknown. My friends, though they found it humorous, quickly dismissed this idea and told me to wait until we made it to the beach. I managed to contain the pressure until we arrived, and in an instant everyone was out of the car, except for me. I guess I had drifted off in thought and not realized that we had arrived. They had left the window open, and I decided it was best to exit the car out the window instead of the door. Must have been some left over. Must do something out the window. Thinking. I flopped out the window and started my run down the beach towards the water. When one is at the beach, one can pee in the water, I remembered, but failed to remember that one normally was in the water with a bathing suit while one did so. I ran past my friends and reached the edge of the water where I promptly pissed on the wet sand. As my piss splashed down, it created the most beautiful array of colours and sparkles, as if the interaction between the sand and my piss was like car oil in a puddle. I finished up and heard my friends laugh and cheer as I ran back to them, relieved and renewed. They pointed out how strange it was that I pissed on the sand in broad daylight, but there wasn't really anyone around, so it didn't matter. Most of my fear and suspicions about being in a different reality had started to fade, and I realized that we were in a town I was familiar with, on a beach I had been to countless times in my life. Proud of the entertainment I had provided for my friends, we walked back to the car and headed to Teton's. I don't remember much of the drive back aside from unpacking all of what had just happened and coming to terms with the reality that I was probably returning to normal after all. This was obvious to Teton and Leaf, but they hadn't consumed the mega button. I'm 16, right? Rashid is like a brother to me, right? I asked Teton. These were questions whose answers were obvious, but I still wasn't sure that we were connected to the real world. Sure, dude, Teton said as he gave me a judgmental look. That was good enough an answer for me to feel like everything was the way it had always been. I don't remember where Tree Demon's mega button mind was at, but I don't think he had gone as far as I had, at least so far as questioning reality was concerned. Once at Teton's house, we exited Torty's car, and an even stronger sense of our return to normal came over me. We walked in the house and up the stairs to Teton's room, and he turned on the television, which was showing one of the live-action Peter Pan renditions. I can't remember what Tinker Bell said, but right after she spoke, it was as if Psilocytes had completely departed in that instant. I was just Steverino again, in a bedroom with my friends, and I had successfully completed my most epic journey with Mycospawn yet. We all felt like bosses, and were ready to eat some food and relax. We consumed green power and a lot of water before our soak in Teton's hot tub. It was luxurious, it was barely noon, and we had already travelled through the great unknown for hours. We were set to rest on our laurels. Rufflesack and I even had plans that night. We were to hang out with Tara and a couple of her friends, apparently one she wanted to hook me up with too. Though it was Tara who I wanted, I understood she may have different tastes, so I was open to other options at that point. It was all very exciting to have reached new mental heights all morning, and to perhaps reach new physical ones later that night. If memory serves me correctly, that night we met up with Tara and her friends at a coffee shop and ended up in their car. Eventually Tara, Rufflesack, and someone else left the car to go pick up some green power and left me and Lonnie in the back. Lonnie had never caught my eye in school, but I was surprised to not have really noticed her prior to that night. She was cute and smelled of sugary perfume. Through a basic verbal exchange, I don't remember at all. We ended up making out and went on to date for a couple months. We broke up when she decided that she missed her old boyfriend and wanted to return to him. That was fine with me, in the end, because she had been an exciting fling, and I had already snuffed out hints that it may not work out. It was incredible to me, though, that I could have such a psychologically variant morning on 2 hours of sleep, and could later proceed to being any kind of attractive. The reader might be wondering if I was irked by the slightly delusional nature of what Psilocytes had revealed to me in the great unknown. The gift of the purple and green revelation may not seem a fair exchange for having the delusions that I was never going to see my parents again, or that our car was going to crash any moment unless I pissed out the window. But it was all psychologically rewarding in a manner I'm still learning the nature of. Spending the first 16 years of my life in a small woodland town was cozy at best, but sheltering and monotonous at worst. I'm not sure that I've made clear the mental state I was in prior to my adolescent power usage, even the green power, though it's hard to separate from a standard adolescent mindset. I think I was falling into an anxious, depressive camp. This experience with the Blue Mycospawn revealed Psilocytes' mechanism of renewing everyday experience. Of course, I used the power of Psilocytes to gain wisdom, but in a simpler way it was to spice up my life, to give me a break from the ordinary. And what makes one appreciate life more than to temporarily believe that normal reality is gone for good? It's that symbolic death that has kept me coming back, however terrifying to the ego it can be.